Well, it's time for part two around our storage portion of the silage zone, where we're talking about maintaining quality, minimizing shrink, and doing it safely when it comes to our forage storage. So today, the three areas that we're going to cover will be around seepage, gaseous losses, and then surface losses. Those are three of the big ones, anywhere from 7 to 14% shrink. So we've got quite a bit of opportunity in there to bring it down closer to that 7, which would be the minimum. And we're going to cover pretty much all three areas, both bags, bunkers, and piles. So to get started, we're going to look again real quick at that number that we know is the money that we're trying to save. If we can find 5% shrink at today's corn prices, we're looking at $1.89 on every ton. That's $1,552 per 100 cows, and 3 times that much if we can find 15%. So today, when we start talking about the seepage losses, mainly what we're looking at there is if we're just trying to cut that silage and put it up too wet. You know, typically over 71, 72%, we're going to see runoff, and that's not what we're looking for. Probably the other big thing that we're looking at there is making sure that we got those knives absolutely as sharp as they can be so that we're getting a nice clean cut, not tearing that silage as we're cutting it and exposing a lot more water cells. So a nice sharp cut that'll hold it. So we'll move on to the gaseous portion. And here we're looking at basically anywhere from 5 to 7% shrink. And the main thing that we're trying to get done is that first part of the fermentation. Once we put that up, getting through that fermentation process as quickly as possible. And what does that come down to? Sure, it's getting rid of our main enemy again, getting rid of the air out of the silage pile by having enough weight on it like we talked last time. But the next thing is we've got to make sure that we got the right microbial population sitting on that silage. We've just got to get that pH down there as quickly as we can to that 4.0, that terminal pH. Then all those secondary fermentations are done, and we've got a nice stable silage pile that's not shrinking. When we look at what really is existing on our silage crops, epiphytes, which is the naturally occurring bacteria, very few of them are lactic acid bacteria, which is the strongest acid, which is what we're trying to produce to drop that pH as quick as we can. So very few of the naturally occurring organisms are lactic acid. And then even of the ones that are, of that 1%, only 8% of that 1% are Lactobacillus plantarum, which we know as a family are the very best lactic acid producers. So we really have to look at using an inoculant that gets on that silage, that's crop specific, that has the research behind it to get that pH drop as quickly as possible. So going on to the surface area, we look at that, we've got anywhere from 2 to 6% shrink that we're trying to alleviate. And what we're going to look at first is bags. If you look at bags, the main thing is we want them on a nice hard surface where they're flat. We want a nice straight line to where there's no bends in the bag to where air can get in. And then the third thing is making sure we're looking at those stretch marks and have them fully stretched out so that we know we're getting them packed as tight as possible. The next thing is, might seem a little bit crazy, but on a pile, consider if you've got a big enough pile that you're covering it as you go, because again, we're trying to keep air and moisture out. Just think about that. If we can stop the air and moisture from getting in, even as we're making the pile, we're ahead. So if we can cover as we go, as like you see in this picture from Kennard Farms, what a great management practice. If we go to bunkers, we want to make a bag out of a bunker because we're getting a lot of spoilage along that top wall and on the sides if we don't have protection against that. So what we promote is making a bag out of a bunker. A lot of people already do it, where we put a piece of tile line down along the lower edge, bring the plastic down over that, put a little feed on it to keep it in place, take the plastic over the top with a piece of drain tile on top of that wall so that we protect the plastic, and then bring it over and fold it over once we make the silage. The next slide shows where they've actually done it with Silo Stop, which is a great product, oxygen barrier, and again, they're keeping that oxygen away. And if you look at the results that they've got in that top 6 inches of the haylage right next to the wall, with just the white plastic, black and white, there's a 19% dry matter loss compared to just 0.7% when they used the Silo Stop with the black and white. And then when you look at what the protection was along the wall, from 4 inches all the way out to 12, you're seeing a tremendous drop in NDFD in the product that's next to the wall that doesn't have a silo stop or a similar cover there to protect it against the rain that comes down. So with that bag out of a bunker, we're making the water come down the side and move away from the silage instead of going into the silage and saving that nutrient content. If you look at the next slide where they've done 51 trials and made an analysis, that top left-hand quadrant, we're at 10% shrink on the silo stop versus almost 20 in regards to the dry matter loss in bunker silos. Tremendous savings when we're using the silo stop versus your normal 6 mil black and white. Rich Muck says though, if you do go to an 8.5 mil black and white, you can have nearly the same protection as the silo stop program. The one thing I would encourage though with the silo stop is always use it on the top. We can use the 8.5 mil on the sides, but let's always use the silo stop on top because of how it sucks down on the silage and helps eliminate that air. It does a great job of doing that. So, thanks for joining me today. Again, we went over the seepage, which again is about just not putting it up too wet and a nice crisp cut on all that silage. Make sure that we're getting a clean cut on that silage. We went to the gaseous where we got to make sure that we're getting the best bugs on that silage possible so that it gets down to that terminal pH as quickly as possible. And then on the last part, hey, if it's a pile, cover as you go. If it's a bunker, make sure that you're making a bag out of that bunker. And then for the last part with bags, get them on a good clean surface. Make sure they're straight with no bends in the bag and that you're fully extending that bag so that you've got it stretched out with great coverage. So again, we've got 7 to 14% opportunity here. Let's take advantage of all of that we can. Thanks.
That concludes this Pioneer Growing Point Agronomy video podcast. Visit our page on pioneer.com and follow us on Twitter and Facebook for more agronomy insights.